Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legionaries of Christ, and I teach theology. This is a podcast on the Star Christ Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 153, and we're continuing with Prophetic Caritatis, the document on religious life, and we're covering 15 and 16 on common life and cloister. Really, that 15 is on common life, 16 is on cloister, like that. So, if you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. So, yesterday we spoke about obedience, the vow of obedience, right? Or as I think they use the Evangelical Council of Obedience as a core of religious life following Jesus' example, but it is collaborative both from superior and subject. Today we're going to talk about common life being modeled in the early church as a key part of religious life, and in this common life there's a need for equality of members and the right application of cloister. So we'll talk about cloister when we get to 16. Actually, most of my commentary on 16 is basically explaining what cloister is, but we're going to cover 15 first. And 15 has three subparagraphs. We're going to read it in two parts. A is about the common life religious, modeled in the early church and like a family. And B and C talk about the need to have members of the community more equal. So our core text is A, and then B and C is more kind of details. So let's read A. Common life, based on the model of the early church, where the body of believers was united in heart and soul, confer Acts 4, and given new force by the teaching of the gospel, the sacred liturgy, especially the Eucharist, should continue to be lived in prayer and the communion of the same Spirit. As members of Christ together as brothers, religious should give pride of place and esteem to each other, confer Romans 12, and bear each other's burdens, confer Galatians 6. For the community, a true family gathered together in the name of the Lord by God's love, which was flooded in the hearts of the members through the Holy Spirit, confer Romans 5, rejoices because he is present among them, confer Matthew 18. Moreover, love sums up the whole law, confer Romans 13, binds all together in perfect unity, confer Colossians 3, and by it we know that we have crossed over from death into life, confer 1 John 3. Furthermore, the unity of the brethren is a visible pledge at Christ's return, confer John 13 and 17, and a source of great apostolic energy, right? So here we start with the early church as the model, right? It's united. Religious life should be united like the early church. United. How are we united? United in prayer. We're united in liturgy. We're united in gospel. We're united in spiritual communion, right? Those are the things we have. That union is first of all spiritual, right? It's not just, hey, we all like the same football team. Well, I know that's not the case, at least. When you start debating football, there is a wide difference of opinions, right? And then how do we live? We live as brothers or as sisters if it's a female religious community, right? There's a pride for each other, right? We bear each other's burdens. We have deep care akin to marriage or family, right? So that is the idea. And the one thing you can choose who your spouse is, but you can't really choose who your fellows are in a religious community. There is a certain degree you could in some communities, but not in the same way you can choose a spouse, right? But we have that family spirit, right? Almost every religious community, or every religious community to an extent, should have a family spirit of how they work, right? It's a family united around Jesus, not just a family united around doing something, right? A religious community might have some apostles. They might be teachers, be nurses, whatever. And that's important. That's not like we don't just ignore that. But they're united first of all around Jesus, right? Because Jesus, our prayer life, is the core for us religious, right? And then what's the core? That core is not just there, but it's also the love and the charity among the members. That's how we build up the community. Right? Daily practice, it gives us a foretaste of heaven, right? That love, that charity, right? We pledge of this life beyond, right? Unity of charity leads to apostolic zeal, right? How am I going to get that apostolic zeal to go out and preach the truth of Jesus, right? We're going to have that from love and charity, right? So, moving on to paragraphs B and C, talking about the need to have a degree of greater unity, a greater of equality. This is just talking about certain practices. I'll explain them right afterwards. About different levels of members, which can create divisions in religious communities contrary to the unity of common life that we just talked about, right? So let's read 15b. That all the members be more closely knit by the bond of brotherly love. Those who are called lay brothers, assistants, or some similar name should be drawn closely into the life and work of the community. Unless conditions really suggest something else, care should be taken that there is only one class of sisters in communities of women. Only that distinction of persons should be retained, which corresponds to the diversity of works which the sisters are destined, either by special vocation from God or by reason of special aptitude. C. However, monasteries of men and communities which are not exclusively lay can, according to their nature and constitutions, admit clerics and laypersons on equal footing and with equal rights and obligations, excepting those which flow from sacred orders. Right? So in the past, there was often a distinction in male religious communities between like the choir monks, the ones who pray in the choir, they do a lot of the more intellectual work, management work, and kind of the lay brothers or the ones who would do the farm work and things like that. And what it's saying is, hey, we need to get rid of this distinction to a large extent. We should work to have an equality of different members, right? At the end, in C, it's say, hey, if some are priests, obviously certain things flow from being priests that are different, right? I can hear confessions. Brother couldn't, right? And things like that. And there are certain things that are certain vocations which can be somewhat different, but even there, the goal is to have them as unified as possible. For example, a number of more enclosed communities, papal cloister, which we'll talk about in the next number, where they're contemplative, they don't go out. Those communities often have one or two members who are the ones who go out and do the shopping, do the other things. They're kind of like not fully enclosed like the rest of the community. They can enter the cloister, but they can also leave, right? And that is a slight difference, but it should not be like a totally different class where like they don't get to vote on new members or something like that, right? So a lot of communities, especially small monasteries, there'll be a secret vote if a new member is proposed. Like a member comes there as praying, as a novice. Well, do we permit this person to make their first vows? Well, the abbot or abbess might make the final decision, but there's often a vote which is consultative at the very least for that. So that's the idea. And here, the important thing is lay just means, in this sense, just means not a priest. So lay can mean not a religious or not a priest or both, right? Technically, but here it's referring to non-priest religious, obviously. And different communities have different rules. Like my community, Leaders of Christ, it says in our constitution, everyone who's a member of the community is either a priest or on the path to the priest. There's no permanent brothers in our community, right? And so there's no that reduces this is an issue for us because when you do have permanent brothers, there can be a sense of like, oh, the priests are better, or the priests are the ones doing this, and the brothers are kind of in a separate level. No, that's not the idea, right? And so that's the idea, to take that kind of unity. And since Vatican II, there was actually a decree, forget the exact year, saying that brothers could actually be superiors in monasteries with monks and things, with priest monks and things like that. Before that was not the case. There's certain rules about there's certain things that an abbot or a provincial, for my case, which would be like the one who's in charge of the Legion for all of Canada and the U.S. and things like that. That role in a community mixed of brothers and priests, for a while it could only be from among the priests. Now they say it can be among the brothers. There's certain more technical reasons for that. We're not going to get into them here. So moving on to paragraph 16, which just has which has no subparagraphs, and it's talking about papal enclosure versus active communities or papal cloister. So what is cloister? So cloister refers to the part of the religious house not open to the public, right? So where I live, you can come to our main entranceway, you can come to our chapel, you can come to our courtyard, come to our dining room. But I live in a wing on here. I don't know if you call it, the wing is how we call it. There's a hallway, and all the rooms up here are just priest rooms. And we have a few little small things. We have a mini kitchenette so we can make coffee at mid-morning and things like that. But that's about all that's up on this part of the building. And this part of the building is cloistered. Like my mom and dad can't come and visit me in my room. They can come and visit me outside. We can go around. But my room and this whole hallway area is cloister. And it just means cut off from outside. Now, what the papal cloister enclosure is where the members never leave that cloister, right? So like for us, even the chapel, which is, 50 yards from my room, probably not even that much, probably 25 yards from my room, is not cloistered. So if I go to the chapel, I'm leaving the cloister, right? And a lot of these communities will have a chapel that has a specific division that the part the sisters or monks are in is cloister, and the part that, the lay people are in, the visitors are in is not. But anyway, so that's the thing. So they're always there. And there still are in those communities exceptions, like, oftentimes if a sister has to go to a specialist doctor or something, they might have to take her there. Or if she needs to have surgery, well, they'll take her to go and have surgery or go and have some kind of test. You can't do it in the enclosure, right? You're not going to have an MRI and an X-ray machine and all those types of things. And if you might have a doctor who comes in, but if he's like, hey, we need to X-ray to see if the bone's broken there, well, the sister needs to go to the X-ray place, right? To do that. And that's allowed, even in these kind of very enclosed ones like that. Anyway, so let's read 16 after I gave this long explanation. Papal cloister should be maintained in the case of nuns engaged in exclusively contemplative life. However, it must be adjusted to conditions of time and place, and obsolete practices suppressed. This should be done in due consultation with the monasteries in question. But other nuns applied by the rule to apostolic work outside the convent should be exempted from papal cloister in order to enable them to better fulfill the apostolic duties entrusted them. Nevertheless, cloisters to be maintained according to the prescriptions of their constitutions. So historically, there's been a whole thing about, like, at certain points, all religious sisters had to be enclosed and things like that. And with that, certain communities where they're trying to do apostolic work were supposed to be enclosed, and it ends up with a kind of complication. And what they're saying here is, with that, the sisters who are doing work outside the convent, let's not try and have like this papal enclosure where you're not supposed to leave it. Have a cloister where it's, forbidden from non-members entering, but don't have it in a papal cloister where you're not supposed to leave, right? If you're engaged, but at least for each convent, each monastery to determine on its own, based on its mission, right? If you're a contemplative community, it makes perfect sense to have a papal cloister enclosure. But, those of us who are not contemplatives, it doesn't make sense to have that. So that concludes today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarQuest produce it and other great podcasts at sgpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Perfecte Caritatis, Catis 17 to 19 on the habit and adaptation of religious life. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can be a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sgpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, such as playlists for individual documents and a reading plan. Amen.